the greatest.
Roshid, I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
It's showtime!
So we're back in 2021, with the first UK show of the year, which is following the January hiatus, which saw a pretty talented matchroom card with a lot of good British young fighters, including Dalton Smith, Hobie Price, Zelfa Barrett, and of course Josh Warrington's shock defeat. But as a card goes, it's a good way to start the year, and obviously we've got plenty of boxing coming up over the next few weeks and months. I'm joined again by Leif, Payne and David Lawson-Cooke from VAVEL Boxing, and we'll jump straight in with the card and just a quick overview of what happens. So, David, just how good is it to have boxing back?
It really is great, mate. It wasn't even really a long wait, but it's felt like it. It's been a long January, especially with the break from boxing in the UK, and we've got a lot of good cards to look forward to in the next few weeks and months. So it's great that it's back.
Yeah, definitely. How did you see the card then, Leif? Did you think it was a pretty decent card for Matchroom to put out for the first one back?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, main event, you can't complain. It was very entertaining, and even the undercard, there's a lot of talking points to take from it, a lot of controversies, and a lot of good fights coming up from that card. But yeah, how did you see it?
I thought it was a good card. A lot of talented fighters on there who could go and do some good things in the sport. Especially Hobie Price he looks like a child when he's fighting. He's such a baby face, and obviously he's not built very much, but obviously he's very talented. And the jury's still out on Zelfa Barrett for me. Probably a tad overrated, but you can see why Matchroom would be bigging him up, because obviously he's their fighter and he's young and he's talented. But obviously I don't think he's as good as maybe they say he is. And obviously Dalton Smith I like a lot. I think he's got a lot of ability. But we'll quickly touch on the scorecards of Kiko Martinez and Zelfa Barrett. Watching the fight, I mean, Kiko Martinez is a very, very experienced fighter. A little pit bull in the ring, sort of like an annoying little bee that won't get off him. Really, just kept going at him for 12 rounds, and I thought Kiko Martinez nicked it in the end. I don't know about you boys, but if you want to, David, you want to give us a quick overview on the two 118-11 scorecards from the judges?
They were outrageous, really, weren't they? I think if Zelfa might have nicked it, you could have went okay. You'd understand why, but them scorecards were so wide, it's so unrealistic. Martinez, as he said, he was just on him all night, so much pressure, and I think he probably stunned Barrett a bit. He probably thought he was there for an easy night, which wasn't the case, was it?
Not at all. Leif, do you think that Martinez deserves a rematch there, or does Zelfa just need to move on and move on to better things?
Yes, definitely he'll feel like that, but will he get it? I doubt it. As you said before, Matchroom's fighters, Zelfa Barrett, we all like a young, explosive fighter that we can maybe relate to, and that's what they're trying to do with Zelfa. I rate him, I always have done, but it was not fair for the travelling fighter, and he will feel very unjustified with that result. So he'll push for the rematch. But if you can see anything coming from that, it'll be Zelfa moving on, and he'll be looking for world title fights. But I really don't think that's what he's capable of yet. I guess we'll see. But yeah, no rematch from me. Even though he probably does deserve it.
It's a strange thing about boxing, isn't it? Because he really does deserve it, but he's probably not going to get it, and it's kind of ridiculous. And you wonder whether these fighters are going to come over now because of the scorecards. Like, go back to even John Ryder's scorecard. That was the one that really stuck out a year and a half ago, whenever it was. And obviously the Lewis Ritson Vasquez card, was it the scorecards for that? They were ridiculous.
Yeah, that was shocking as well.
That was sort of a similar sort of fight, because you had the experienced older fighter against the up and coming younger fighter, and the older fighter got done over again. So it's not the first time it's happened, and it won't be the last either. So that's something that, I mean, Eddie Hearn was good to speak out about it at the end. Obviously he was quite outspoken about it, but how much truth there'd actually be in the future for him to, I don't know how much he can really influence it, but I think the British board needs to look at judges and referees a little bit more closely, because these are people's careers and people's lives on the line at times. So they need to really look into that. But one fight that was indisputable was Josh Warrington's massive shock defeat. I mean, a guy even headline, you watch the content all week, you're looking at Josh Warrington, he was happy, he was buzzing, he was very proud to be headlining this card, and there's a lot of talk about him, which is fair enough. Talk of him being the best featherweight in the world. David, is he the best featherweight in the world now?
It's very hard to say, isn't it? Is it the long period out the ring? And you would have said, what was it, nearly 18 months out the ring? 18 months ago, without a doubt, you'd say yes to that, wouldn't you? But now, especially after that loss, it's hard to say. And you've got people coming up like Jazadek and Kid Galahad. It's going to take a lot for him to get back to be the number one, because I don't think he is there right now.
Leif, with these, there's a lot of, I've sort of narrowed it down to the main reasons why I think he lost. I'm just going to rail them off with both of you now. I want you both to just pick one, really, sort of what the main reason is. Obviously, it's sort of it's all of the reasons together. You know, it's a little bit of everything why he did lose. But for me, it was inactive for over 15, 16 months. No crowd, which really, you know, was really an issue for him with the way he likes to fight, with the energy he gets off the crowd, especially a Leeds crowd, and overlooking his opponents. So what would you say would be the key reason out of those three for losing?
I'd say number one has definitely got to be the fans. He's the Leeds Warrior, that's his nickname, and he's proud to be from Leeds. And he's got a great backing, and for him to have, that was his 31st fight or something like that, without his fans there, it would be a massive shock. But you say those 3 points, I agree with all of them. The massive thing for me was he's not a massive puncher. He never relies on that. So to go toe-to-toe with Kiko like that, not Kiko, Mauricio, I just found it quite baffling. He's an excellent boxer and the top in the division when he's on his day. So I just don't know why he was going to go toe-to-toe, trying to slug with him. He should just stick to his boxing, because he had no answer for that left hook. And it should have been stopped in the fourth round, in my opinion. But yeah, definitely should have stuck to his boxing, because that's what he's best at.
And just one quick point there. I mean, because there's no fans there doesn't mean that he suddenly becomes a bad tactician on the night and he can't follow a game plan through. I don't feel like that should affect him at all. And I think that's really poor, to be honest. I mean, for someone who's that good, it's so poor not to follow a game plan. It's so obvious he was heavy-handed. Eddie Hearn was telling him in the change rooms before, don't trade with him. Just stick to your boxing, you'll be fine. To not do that is absolutely criminal. And in this game, you can't have slip-ups, especially what he was aiming to do after this fight, which is, you know, he wants to go and take over the world. You can't do that, and you can't have nights like that. It's a huge career moment for him, and I think it's a massive. He might never come back from it. I mean, it's something we could just bring up in a bit, but for now, I mean, it's such a bad night for him. And David, what about you? What was the main reason for you, do you think?
Well, the activity is a massive thing, as you said. And I think that might have been the reason why he hasn't stuck to his game plan there, maybe. He wants to come back with a bang. He's wanting to make a big statement. He hasn't been around for a while, and it's backfired. But for me, when I was watching the event all the way through, I had complete confidence. And then within a round, you could just see he wasn't fighting the same as he was. And I just think, is that down to him being an arena fighter? He's fought much better fights such as Frampton and Selby. And arguably, you could say they're better boxers in Warrington. But he's always had that crowd and that energy and that willpower and that grit. And I think it just took away from his performance a little bit. And tactically, he was very poor on the night. I think if you wanted to go in exchange with Lara, then a bit of head movement would have helped, because he was just there to be hit all night. And it was just a bad night around for him. But again, as you said about the stoppage there, Leif, it should have been stopped in the fourth round, and we're lucky that we haven't seen any massive repercussions because of that.
What do you make of the comments, Leif, that some of the pundits after the fight saying that's a fight that stays with you for the rest of your career, and it adds on so many miles in terms of, you know, for the rest of his career, it's going to be hard when he gets into those bigger fights and those longer, harder fights, that he may have just had some of that beaten off him?
Yeah, his longevity will definitely suffer. I'm not the one to compare, but look at Manny Pacquiao when he was knocked out. I can't remember who against. He's still a great fighter, but it wasn't that explosive and it wasn't the same again. And it's a very harsh sport, and to be caught like that. And I think the response was good and bad. Obviously, you're going to have the ones who are going to say he's finished. But even former opponents like Kid Galahad, like he was very, how would I say, very kind on Twitter, and which is the part of the sport that I really love. But the main point that I can bring up is, yeah, he's great in that division, but why didn't he just jump up a division? Maybe why didn't he put that featherweight title behind him when he vacated it and move on, go for a 2-division world champion? That's something that I didn't understand. You could argue that he'd done everything that he could in that division, and then he can set his goals on something else. But I feel like Adam Booth and all the post fight, all that kind of stuff there, they were spot on with it. And the best thing for Josh is that he was honest with his performance, and he did say that he should have stick with his boxing, and that's what he's best at, and he didn't. So, yeah.
Really strange night all around, really. Something that you expect, just a routine win, but we didn't get it. And now the whole division is up in arms, really. I mean, I don't know about you, but for the fight week, all I heard in fight week was Gary Russell and Kanju. That's all I heard pretty much from the whole week. Did you get a feeling that he was talking about them too much?
I wouldn't like to say he's looked past Lara by speaking about them too much, but it's almost looks like a weird matchup for me, because Lara at 22, you've come in, barely knows anyone about him. Apart from Navarrete said that he'd fought him and in sparring, said he was a hard hitter, but I think many people thought, and maybe Josh thought himself, that he was just going to walk through him and move on to them bigger things. But looking at the matchup, it seemed like a weird one to take the way it's panned out, but I think that might be down to how Josh boxed on the night. But maybe he did look past him. Everyone can fall to that, can't they? All the big names have done it before, where they set up big fights in their head. You've just got to fight the man in front of you at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a bit of, we've seen it all before, and it's come to bite him. I think he overlooked him too much. I think he was speaking way too much in pre-match build-up, podcast he was on, fight week. It was all about that. He wants that ring belt. He wants to be the name, the face of a division. Obviously, people had him as one of the best. He still is one of the best, but now it's thrown into disarray, really. But changing focus, I would like to look at Lara, really, because he's 22. His only 2 losses came in his first fight in his career, and then his 13th fight, which was against a guy who only had 6 fights. So his 2 losses were kind of just the sort of, not to now, it doesn't really matter for him. They were so long ago. He's such a different fighter now. Fought in Mexico his whole life. He's coming through the system. It's tough. It's aggressive. He's dealt with a lot of fights. At 22, though, he's fought, 20 odd, how many times? 20, 25 times. He's got a lot of knockouts. He likes to trade. He can take a punch. He's heavy-handed. He's got power. What about him now? What does he do? Does he go into a rematch, or does he go and aim for the other fighters in the division that Josh Warrington was looking at?
Well, the rematch clause is there, if I'm not mistaken, and Josh will want that. I think he's learned a very good lesson, and I think he's got a good. Coming into that fight, he probably had a bit of fire in him to prove himself. First time he's ever not fought in Mexico. He's come to headline a show. A lot of pressure on his shoulders from his home crowd, but he's gone in there and he's done the business, and he's the A side now for this rematch. So I wish him all the best, because I was completely shocked looking at his resume. 22 years old. He just looks nothing like a 22-year-old. He's a 35-year-old experienced Mexican world champion. Not to jump to any conclusions, in a 22-year-old's body. So, he's the A side, and he's got an exciting future ahead of him if this rematch happens and he does the business again.
Yeah, thinking of it as a rematch, David. I mean, we saw obviously when AJ lost to Ruiz first time, it was it was, he was battered and he was concussed, similar to how Warrington sort of was. And then the second fight, we saw a massive change of tactics, etc. You can sort of look at, there's a sort of similarities there with this fight if it does go to a rematch. But do you feel that Lara he's not afraid to take a punch? He's clearly got the power and he knows how to beat Josh Warrington. Do you think it'll be a very, very dangerous rematch?
I think it could be. It really could. I think everyone thought if Josh boxed well, he was going to win that fight easy. The one thing I picked up from even the ring walk, he just looks so confident and almost arrogant walking into the ring. You wouldn't expect that from a 22-year-old coming from a different country. And you're saying about his punching power there, that punching power stayed in him from round 1 to round 9. Every time he was swinging, he was trying to kill Warrington, really. And I think it's a dangerous fight. But as Leif said, I think he might take it only because he's a proud lad, Josh Warrington, isn't he? I think he'll want to prove that was just one bad night and he wants to get back to his best.
Yeah, I think he would. I think if he goes back and wins that fight, he sort of gets back on track again. And coming from, obviously, from where we saw him when he left the ring, if you flash forward 6 months' time and he's got his hands up after beating him in the rematch, that's a massive turnaround for him. And it'd be very much pride as well to go back and win that. And it's a lot of great boxers have had big defeats in their careers, and if they've gone and avenged them, then it makes it all the better for reading, when they retire and for legacy and all that. So looking at those two, we've looked at those two now. We've looked at Lara in the future. Is it the end for Josh Warrington potentially though, Leif, if it does go in terms of what he wanted to achieve before this fight?
No, I think the rematch, if it happens, will be very, very different. Looking towards the end of the year or halfway through the year, fans possibly could be let back in, and for him to have that on his behalf, like that will be massively beneficial for him. But the loss, then another loss there would put him in a category of, I wouldn't say washed up because that's quite harsh and he's still very young, but just in a weird one where he might just be fighting just because he loves it. And he is world-class caliber and he should get the chance to fight for a world title again. But it's a weird one because you don't want to just keep on losing and losing and losing, which I don't think he will. But yeah, as I said before, it just all comes down to if this rematch happens. And if not, maybe a couple of decent domestic fights that Eddie can get him in. And yeah, he needs those fans back in the stadium, definitely.
Yeah, David, do you think fans coming back in, it's a completely different fight?
Yeah, I do. He just, as I said before, when in big arenas, I didn't think he was going to beat Selby. I didn't think he was going to beat Frampton. And he just did. The energy of him when he's got the crowd, and it's like they drive him on half the time. It sounds crazy, but he just didn't look like he had the energy. And I think they are a massive boost for Josh Warrington when they're in there.
Yeah, I think the fans, it's the energy. Yeah, you feed off it. When he does catch them, and then they spur him on. He's the energy he showed in the Frampton fight, particularly. Oh my days! It was he literally didn't stop. It was crazy. That's what you expected to see on Saturday night. You expected to come out and just go for it and do what he usually does. It's educated pressure and shot selection and the right time to put the pressure on, the right time just to hang back. But he was all over the place. Distance was gone. Confidence after the first few rounds. He was
fighting the fight that he couldn't fight. That's what he was trying to do, because he can't punch. He can't throw a powerful strike that would really, really worry them. And Lara would have just looked at his record, which you shouldn't look at things on paper, but 7 knockouts and 30 wins. It's not something to be afraid of if he's got that power, which he showed. And like we shouldn't write Josh off, because you think about those 3 fights that you can put out there: Lee Selby, Carl Frampton, and Kid Galahad. They are 3 absolutely great competitors that he's come out on top against. And think about Carl Frampton when he was in his prime. That is a scary fight, and he beat him. Yeah, it was a really close fight and a great fight. And then he beat Lee Selby, former world champion, who he won the bout off, and then defended it against Kid Galahad. Or if I got that the wrong way around, I'm not too sure. But so you can't write him off yet, because he's proved himself. And there's a lot of fighters out there who have not fought anybody very good. and just living up because they've got a world title. So we'll just see what the news is in the next couple of weeks, and he just needs a good recovery and go out there and keep on fighting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was going to be devil's advocate, saying, you know, thinking of the worst case scenario, but obviously he's beaten top fighters. Those names right there are the huge names in the division and have been and can, you know, they are the big names. And the fact is that he can come back, he can get those big fights, and I'd back him to get the better of, you know, the likes of a Kanju. You know, I think he's got the ability to go there and beat him, and the other big fights. I mean, he's right in, you know, he's right up there to win them. You know, he's got a great chance to be the king of this division if he wants to be. But it all stems from the rematch that, you know, I'd like to see. I mean, it was a great spectacle. Obviously, he's got some demons to overcome, but this is it now. This is a big time for his career. I'm sure we'd all love to see the rematch. I'm sure we'd all love to see him win and get back on track. And I think he can do that. And it's up to him over the next few weeks, and we'll see what news comes through. But obviously, he did suffer a perforated eardrum, shoulder injury, and an eye socket injury, I think. So, you know, they're three pretty tough injuries for the short term. So we'll have to see how that goes. But in terms of the fight in the weekend, obviously we're looking towards the next weekend of fighting, which is a great card with David Avanesyan versus Josh Kelly, which we will preview in another video. And this is just the start of so many fights. As Eddie Hearn said, it's boxing every week, potentially for God knows how many, the year, perhaps, maybe, you know.
It's going to be a great year for British boxing, definitely.
And even world boxing, plenty of great fights. Could have the biggest fight of all time, potentially, with Joshua Fury. So much to look forward to. And we will be previewing absolutely everything and talking everything, because that's what we love to do, and we love boxing. So we'll jump straight on. We'll get straight on the next video, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks for listening again.